March 5, 1944, North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Iceland. Captain Lieutenant Otto Kruger pressed his palm against the U-boat's steel hull, feeling the faint vibration of its silent engines. Outside, the ocean stretched dark and endless, the surface churned by a cold wind. Inside, the crew of 60 moved in near silence, their steps muffled by rubber-soled boots. No periscope broke the waves. No exhaust smoke betrayed their position. For 18 days, they had cruised below the surface, diving deeper than any Allied sonar could reach. This was no ordinary U-boat. This was the Type XXI, Hitler's wonder submarine, and it was rewriting the rules of undersea warfare. The Type XXI's story began in 1942, when the German Kriegsmarine faced a crisis. For years, U-boats had terrorized Allied shipping lanes, sinking millions of tons of cargo. But by 1942, the Allies had fought back. They deployed radar to spot U-boats on the surface, sonar to track them underwater, and convoys guarded by destroyers armed with depth charges. German U-boat losses skyrocketed. 250 were sunk in 1943 alone. The Kriegsmarine needed a submarine that could outrun, outdive, and outsmart the Allies. The Type XXI was their answer. The man behind the Type XXI was Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet. Donitz had risen through the ranks since World War I, when he served as a U-boat captain. He understood the limitations of existing U-boats. They were slow underwater, top speed 8 miles per hour, had a surface to recharge their batteries, and could only dive to 650 feet. Donitz demanded a submarine that could stay submerged for weeks, dive to 1,000 feet, and reach 17 miles per hour underwater, fast enough to outrun most Allied destroyers. He turned to Germania-Werft, a shipyard in Kiel, to make a reality. Germania-Werft design team, led by Chief Engineer Heinz Sherman, started with a clean sheet. They rejected the ship-shaped hull of older U-boats, which created drag underwater. Instead, they used a teardrop hull, wide in the middle, tapering at both ends, optimized for speed beneath the waves. The hull was made of high-tensile steel, thicker than any previous U-boats, allowing it to withstand the pressure at 1,000 feet. To reduce noise, the engines were mounted on rubber blocks, and the propellers were coated in a special polymer to muffle their spin. Power was another breakthrough. Older U-boats relied on diesel engines for surface travel and electric batteries for underwater use, batteries that died after 24 hours of slow cruising. The Type XXI had 2 diesel engines for surface speed, 15 miles per hour, and 2 massive electric motors for underwater travel. But the real innovation was the battery system. 252 large lead-acid batteries, twice as many as older U-boats, stored in waterproof compartments. These batteries gave the Type XXI a range of 3,000 miles underwater at 5 miles per hour, enough to cross the Atlantic without surfacing. 4 faster bursts. The motors could push the sub to 17 miles per hour, though this drained the batteries in just 2 hours. The Type XXI also had advanced sensors. It carried a passive sonar system, no active pings that will reveal its position, capable of detecting Allied ships 20 miles away. A periscope with a wide-angle lens allowed the captain to scan the surface without raising the sub too high. For attack, it had 6 torpedo tubes in the bow, loaded with new acoustic homing torpedoes that could track Allied ships by their engine noise. The sub could carry 23 torpedoes, more than double the load of older U-boats, and fire them in quick succession then escaped before the Allies could react. Construction began in 1943, but the Type XXI faced immediate challenges. Germania Wharf shipyard in Kiel was bombed by Allied aircraft in March 1943, delaying production by 6 months. To speed things up, the Kriegsmarine adopted a modular approach. Parts of the sub, hull sections, engines, battery compartments were built in smaller factories across Germany, then shipped to assembly yards. This allowed production to continue even if individual factories were hit. But the system was chaotic. Parts often arrived late or didn't fit, and many were made by slave labor from concentration camps, workers who had little training and even less incentive to build a quality product. By December 1943, the first prototype, U-2511, was ready for sea trials. Donitz personally attended the launch, declaring the Type XXI the weapon that will win the Battle of the Atlantic. The trials revealed promise and problems. The sub reached 16.8 miles per hour underwater, just short of the target 17 miles per hour, and dove to 980 feet without damage. But the battery system overheated during high-speed runs, and the sonar picked up false signals from schools of fish. The crew also struggled with the sub size. At 251 feet long, it was 50 feet longer than older U-boats, making it harder to maneuver in tight spaces. Despite these flaws, the Kriegsmarine ordered mass production. By early 1944, 16 shipyards across Germany and occupied Europe were building Type XXI components. The goal was to produce 200 subs by the end of 1944, enough to flood the Atlantic and cut Allied supply lines to Britain. But reality fell short. Allied bombing raids destroyed factories making battery components. Rail lines carrying hull sections were sabotaged by resistance fighters. By June 1944, only 20 Type XXIs had been assembled and none were ready for combat. The first operational Type XXI, U-3008, was commissioned in August 1944, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Otto Kruger, a veteran of 12 combat patrols in older U-boats. Kruger's first mission was to test the sub's capabilities in the North Atlantic. He left Kiel on February 18, 1944, with orders to avoid combat and focus on endurance. For 28 days, U-3008 cruised underwater, surfacing only once to take on fresh water, a process that took 30 minutes, done at night to avoid detection. The crew survived on dried rations and condensed milk, sleeping in shifts in cramped bunks. The batteries held up, though they needed to be recharged using a small diesel generator that could run while the sub was just below the surface, its exhaust routed through a telescoping pipe to avoid smoke. Kruger's patrol was a success. He returned to Kiel on March 17, 1944, having traveled 4,500 miles without being detected by Allied forces. His report was glowing. The Type XXI could outrun any destroyer, dive deeper than any sonar, and stay hidden for weeks. Donitz ordered more patrols, and by October 1944, 10 Type XXIs were at sea, testing Allied defenses. Allied forces were slow to detect the threat. For months, their sonar operators reported strange echoes, fast-moving contacts that disappeared before they could be tracked. At first, they thought the echoes were from schools of whales or faulty equipment. It wasn't until November 1944, when a British destroyer, HMS Venturer, detected U-2511 on sonar, that the Allies realized they faced a new type of U-boat, Venture's captain, Lieutenant James Launders, ordered depth charges dropped, but U-2511 dove to 900 feet and outran the destroyer at 15 miles per hour. Launders later wrote in his log, "This was no ordinary U-boat. It moved like a fish, and we had no way to catch it." The Allies responded by upgrading their sonar systems to detect deeper, faster targets. They also deployed new homing depth charges that could track a sub's acoustic signature. But these upgrades took time, and in the meantime, Type XXIs began attacking Allied convoys. On December 5, 1944, U-3018, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Walter Schwieger, attacked convoy HX-326, 35 merchant ships guarded by 6 destroyers. Schwieger fired 4 acoustic homing torpedoes from 3 miles away, sinking 2 cargo ships before escaping at 16 miles per hour. The destroyers chased them for 4 hours but never got close. It was the first confirmed kill by a Type XXI. By January 1945, 30 Type XXIs were operational, and they had sunk 12 Allied ships. But the Kriegsmarine's hopes of flooding the Atlantic were dashed by 2 factors: time and resources. Germany was now losing the war. Soviet troops were closing in on Berlin. Allied bombers were pounding German cities daily. The shipyards building Type XXIs were running out of steel, fuel, and workers. Many subs were left half-built on the slips, their parts scavenged for other weapons. The Type XXI also faced problems with its crew. The sub's advanced systems required trained sailors, men who understood how to operate the sonar, maintain the batteries, and handle the new torpedoes. But the Kriegsmarine was running out of trained personnel. Many Type XXI crews included young recruits with just 6 weeks of training, and older sailors transferred from surface ships who had never served on a submarine. Accidents became common. On January 20th, 1945, U-3021 sank during sea trials when its battery compartment flooded. All 58 crew members died. On February 12th, U-2521 collided with a mine while diving, breaking its hull and sinking within minutes. If you found this interesting, give a thumbs up to show your support. Drop a wonderful in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Stick around till the end, because I reveal 3 mind-blowing facts you won't want to miss. Haven't followed yet? Hit that follow button so you won't miss our next deep dive. Trust me, the best is yet to come. Even the subs that made it to sea struggled. The acoustic homing torpedoes often malfunctioned, missing their targets or circling back to attack the Type XXI itself. The battery system, while better than older models, still overheated during high-speed runs, forcing crews to slow down. And the sub size made it hard to hide in shallow waters, something older U-boats could do to avoid detection. The final blow came in April 1945. Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, and Germany surrendered on May 8th. At the time of surrender, 118 Type XXIs had been built, but only 40 were operational. Most of these were scuttled by their crews to avoid capture, following Donit's order to not let a single U-boat fall into enemy hands. A few, like U-2511 and U-3008, surrendered to Allied forces, their crews hoping to avoid being taken prisoner by the Soviets. The Allies studied the captured Type XXIs intensely. The United States Navy took U-2511 to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire, where engineers spent months dissecting its systems. They were impressed by the teardrop hull, which became the basis for post-war American submarines like the USS Nautilus, the first nuclear-powered sub. The British Royal Navy tested U-3008 in the English Channel, confirming its speed and endurance. Their report concluded that the Type XXI was a generation ahead of any Allied submarine, and that if Germany had built it earlier, the Battle of the Atlantic might have had a different outcome. The Type XXI's legacy is complex. It was a technological marvel, one of the first submarines designed for prolonged underwater operations, with features that would define submarine design for decades. But it was also a product of Nazi desperation, built too late, and with too many flaws to change the course of the war. Its modular construction system, while innovative, was undermined by poor quality control and slave labor. Its advanced weapons and sensors were let down by unreliable components and untrained crews. For the men who served on Type XXIs, the sub was a mix of pride and fear. Otto Kruger, who survived the war and later became a merchant marine captain, wrote in his 1965 memoir, "The Type XXI was a wonder, but it was also a death trap. We knew it was better than any Allied sub, but we also knew it wasn't perfect. Every time we dove, we wondered if the batteries would hold or if the hull would crack." Walter Schwieger, who was captured by the British and spent 2 years in a POW camp, recalled, "It was a shame. The Type XXI could have been something great. But by the time we had it, Germany was already dead." In the post-war years, the Type XXI's influence spread. The Soviet Union copied its teardrop hull for their Whiskey-class submarines. The French Navy used its battery system in their Narval-class subs. Even the first nuclear-powered submarines owed a debt to the Type XXI. Its focus on underwater speed and endurance laid the groundwork for vessels that could stay submerged for months. Today, only a handful of Type XXI survive. U-2540, which was scuttled in 1945 and raised in 1957, is on display at the Deutsches Marine Museum in Wilhelmshaven, Germany. Its hull bears the scars of its scuttling, and its interior has been restored to show how the crew lived and worked. Another, U-3008, is on display at the Royal Navy Submarine Museum in Gosport, England, a reminder of the threat it once posed. The Type XXI story is a cautionary tale about technology and timing. It was a brilliant piece of engineering, but it arrived too late to save Nazi Germany. It could cross the Atlantic without surfacing, outrun Allied destroyers, and dive deeper than any sonar could reach. But it couldn't overcome Germany's collapsing industrial base, its shortage of trained crews, or the sheer weight of Allied numbers. It was a super submarine, but it was still just a machine, one that couldn't change the fact that Germany was fighting a war it could never win. As we look back on World War II, the Type XXI is often overshadowed by more famous weapons. The atomic bomb, the V-2 rocket, the Me-262 jet fighter. But it deserves to be remembered. It deserves to be remembered for what it was. A glimpse of the future of undersea warfare, a product of both genius and desperation, and a reminder that even the most advanced technology can't save a regime built on hate and aggression. The Type XXI never won the Battle of the Atlantic. It never changed the course of the war. But it did something else. It showed the world what a submarine could be. It showed that submarines didn't have to surface to survive, that they could be fast and quiet and deadly. And in that, it laid the groundwork for the submarines that patrol the oceans today, vessels that owe their speed, their depth, and their stealth to Hitler's forgotten super submarine. In the end, The Type XXI's greatest legacy is not in the ships it sank or the battles it fought. It's in the way it reimagined what a submarine could do. It was a machine ahead of its time, born into a world that couldn't handle it. And for the Allied sailors who feared it, it was a reminder that in war, the most dangerous weapon isn't always the one that wins. It's the one that makes you question everything you thought you knew. The Type XXI is gone now, but its influence lives on. Every time a modern submarine dives to 1,000 feet, every time it cruises silently for weeks without surfacing, every time it outruns pursuer, we see a little bit of the Type XXI. It was a super submarine, yes, but more than that, it was a revolution that changed undersea warfare forever.